Hello, friends of the dark. We're going to take a moment at the top of this episode to tell you about Nynaeve, a storytelling blog and podcast, written, recorded, and released in installments. The premise being the main character, Nynaeve, has told her story full of adventures, humor, and plenty of creative baddies to Astrid Jeff, the writer, who's been putting it in story form for us, the people of the internet.
So I read through, I listened to a fair amount of it, and I do want to say that one of the things that Astrid Jeff is doing so well is her narration is fantastic. So she's like reading her stories as a podcast, and she's got this great Australian accent. She's from Sydney.
It does make it better.
And it's just wonderful. It's very pleasant to listen to. Her voice is top notch. So like, apart from the quality of the story, which is really funny, she's just a delight to listen to.
When I was going through the stories, it just seemed like a really self-aware, kind of creative, I don't want to call it silly and say that it's and have people think that's a negative thing, but like there are often silly elements where like this girl has to go into the another realm, and there's all these like really silly baddies that I mentioned in kind of the intro that I thought was just funny.
Yeah, I was definitely like giggling to myself the entire time I was laughing this. I pulled a couple of quotes. The dragon had just licked her face. Was that why she smelled shit?
So right, there's like a little self-awareness like that.
She didn't believe in love at first sight. She did, however, believe in lust at first sight. Never with the people she rescued, though. She had a professional reputation to maintain.
But yeah, it's really fun, and I think it's coming out in like really short, easily digestible segments for people to check out, and I feel like that kind of content is really popular these days, especially short-form storytelling.
I jumped in and just had a lot of fun. It's clearly imagined world, sort of like this fun little... It's not like anything I've really read before. Which I think is a really positive thing.
It's a really cute, fun project, and you should go check out astridjeff.com.
ASTRIDJEF.com.
astridjeff.com for the full story.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. And this is chapter 46, Veils. And our symbol is the opposing ladies, or the Black Aja symbol.
Inverted faces.
Inverted faces. The crowds were thick in the confined, winding streets of the Calpine near the Great Circle. The smoke of countless cook fires rising above the high white walls gave the reason. Sour smells of smoke and cooking and long unwashed sweat hung heavy in the humid morning air, with the crying of children and the vague murmurs that always clung to large masses of people. Together, enough to muffle the shrill caws of gulls sailing overhead. The shops in this area had long since locked the iron grills over their doors for good. Disgusted, Eagnin threaded her way through the throng afoot. It was dreadful. That order had broken down enough for penniless refugees to take over the circles, sleeping among the stone benches. It was as bad as their rulers letting them starve. Her heart should have been gladdened. This dispirited rabble could never resist the Corinne, and then proper order would be restored. But she hated looking at it. Most of the ragged people around her seemed too apathetic to wonder at a woman in their midst in a clean, well-tended blue riding dress, silk, if plainly cut. Men and women in once fine garb, soiled and wrinkled now, speckled the crowd, so perhaps she did not stand out enough for contrast. The few who seemed to wonder whether her clothes meant coins in her purse were dissuaded by the competent way she carried her stout staff, as tall as she was. Guards and chair-bearers had to be left behind today. Florin Gelb would surely have realized he was being followed by that array. At least this dress, with its divided skirts, gave her a little freedom of movement. Keeping the weaselly little man in sight was easy in this mass of people, despite having to dodge ox carts or the occasional wagon. hauled by sweating, bare-chested men more often than animals. Gelb and 7 or 8 companions, burly, rough-faced men all, shoved through in a knot, an eddy of curses following them. Those fellows angered her. Gelb meant to try kidnapping again. He had found 3 women since she sent him the gold he had asked for, none more than casually resembling any on her list, and whined over every one she rejected. She should never have paid him for that first woman he snatched off the street. Greed and the memory of gold had apparently washed out the hide-flaying tongue-lashing she had given him along with the purse.
So that Gelb, our famous coward, introducing Eagnin to...
He is...
the Supergirls. And yeah, he was basically one of Domon's old crew. Back when he was going upriver. He's definitely not part of his crew anymore.
Yeah, like chapter 20 of The Eye of the World or something.
Mm-hmm.
Gelb
got kicked in the face by Rand.
Yeah, in his opening scene gets kicked right in the face, and he's the scum of the earth, so that makes us happy.
Yeah, he's sleeping on watch and stuff like
really
that.
Really awful person.
Right. And so he's like obviously going against the wishes of Eagnin here. You know, he's doing something that she does not want him to do, and she's like, ugh, I know he's going to do it, and I'm just going to make a point by like beating the crap out of him.
And she's upset because basically the last time he brought her one of the women that, quote, matched her description, unquote, she didn't match the description at all. And so now Eagnin has to deal...
That was Leilwin, the last person who got kidnapped.
So now Eagnin has to deal with this person who isn't who she wants, who has now been kidnapped and is aware of what they're doing. She can't just let them back into society, so she's worried that this is going to happen again. Now this guy's just going to keep bringing her random women off the street, thinking that she'll pay him, which she doesn't intend to.
No, well, she's not even going to let her... not going to let him even abduct them to give them to her. Leah's asking about the name. This is something we talked about in the previous episode, but Eagnin takes on the name Leilwin just as a temporary name, and she takes it on temporarily, thinking back to this woman she kidnapped, and then
sold into slavery.
And then it ends up that Tuon makes the name permanent, but she picks the name Shipless, but she basically makes her temporary name a permanent name and says, well, from now on, you're Leilwin Shipless. But the Leilwin was initially something Eagnin chose as a cover name, a fake name, when she was hanging out with Matt and that group in the circus.
Right. So Eagnin's shame name is made after the woman that she had accidentally kidnapped by men in her employ and then sold into slavery because she didn't know what to do with her. So that her punishment name is related to a person whose life she destroyed. It's all very fitting.
So in the next paragraph, it says, shouts from behind her pulled her head around and tightened her hands on the staff. And this is where we get the beggar with the broken arm and the woman saying, he only asked for a coin.
Right.
Well, we find out at the end of the chapter, when we see things from the Seeker's point of view, it was actually the Seeker who broke this guy's arm while he was following Eagnin. And this almost gave him away. She almost spotted him when he did this. So just a little bit of a little circular piece of information that the Seeker's the one who broke this guy's arm and is following her.
Yeah, I'm really glad you pointed that out, because that means that the Seeker is following Eagnin, who's following Gelb. Who's following Nynaeve and Elayne, who are looking for the Black Aja.
And you'll notice that the little bit of channeling they do here ends up attracting Moghedien, who follows them back to their hut as well. There's a bit of a paragraph here until she spots basically Nynaeve and Elayne and goes, oh, they're going to try and kidnap Nynaeve because she looks kind of like Serene, one of the Soldam that she's trying to find. She's much, much shorter than Serene, because Nynaeve's only like 5'6" or whatever, and Serene's probably much taller. But she's like, ugh.
I was just going to say, I think Nynaeve is supposed to be even shorter than that.
Yeah, or like 5'4" or something
exactly.
like that. Yeah. I always get the heights confused. But yeah, and they're definitely after Nynaeve this whole time. And so that's the only thing I really have until the perspective switch to Elayne and Nynaeve.
And of course, the whole time, Elayne is like, surely they were trying to kidnap me. My
'Cause
mother
I'm
would
the
make
daughter
them
heir.
rich
Yeah.
to turn me back over. Nynaeve's like, yeah, I don't think so, man. I'm the only one they grabbed.
Obviously, to get you out of the way so they could kidnap me, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's when she spits out the veil because she's raising her nose up in the air and she's getting all arrogant. And she's the veil gets in her mouth.
I think that happens a couple of times in this chapter. But yeah, this is the first time we see them because they got their Tarabonner costumes.
They're pretty silks. We notice Nynaeve is definitely wearing dresses that are way too nice for her station that she assumes. She's like, I'm wearing really, really, really nice clothing that puts them way out of place. Good Two Rivers woolens are good enough for me, and yet she wears like the most thin, drapey, clingy dresses.
Well, yeah.
And she's hot, and she knows it.
Nynaeve asked their innkeeper to have a seamstress make them dresses that would be fit with the local fashion so they wouldn't stand out so much. And she goes and has it done, but they're in these like, yeah, sexy, breezy dresses, and these two puritanical Andorran women hate it. They don't, they really don't like wearing the sexier clothes.
Do you still think they're in a place where they don't like it, or do you think they're actually like kind of okay with it?
Well, in the dialogue and in their heads, I feel like we see a lot of hemming and hawing. Like they're telling themselves that, oh, this is inappropriate. Like I should be wearing something a little more business cash, not like cocktail dress,
Right.
But as the series goes on, and I feel like even now, like, of course they like it to some degree. Like everybody wants to have like the most fashionable, sexy clothing. Even if you're a person who's like, I don't need any of that. It's still cool. You still feel really good. I'm like that,
You still want to look
I'm like,
good.
I wear jeans and a t-shirt all the time, but every 5 years when someone like gets married or dies and I put on a tuxedo, I'm like, I look good. Like,
Which
it
is
feels
not always
good.
the appropriate emotion to have at a funeral. Oh, rad. Oh, yeah, that guy's dead.
Oh yeah, I only wear this stuff every couple of years, but I like it every time.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's something to be said for dressing up, and it's a shame that really in our lives we don't have any opportunity to do it other than, hugely significant events. In a way, I find that's kind of sad.
Yeah. That reminds me of a funny story that I can tell really quickly. Me and Julia are regulars at this cocktail bar. We probably go like once a week. And whatever, we were sitting there having drinks, and this couple walked in. They sat down next to us, and they were wearing like the fanciest possible clothing. And I don't remember how it came up, but they were like telling us that there is no occasion. They're not dressed up for a special reason. They just do that sometimes. They just like put on their finest clothes and go out to the bar and have a drink and go home. We're like, that is the coolest idea. We should do this at some point. So we have rough designs on doing that at some point.
It's sort of a good idea to have like a fancy date night every once in a while. Just like,
yeah, but
even
you
if we're
don't
not
even
going
have to go to a
somewhere
fancy place. Just
Yeah.
like put on your nicest clothes and go to wherever you're a regular.
right. Because where else are you going to wear your nicest
like,
clothes?
Today is special because we have declared it to be special.
I love your circular logic. It's very Wheel of Time. Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that's worth, especially in a relationship, it's worth taking the effort to make certain events feel nice. Like when you get stuck in a routine and in a rut and you don't make anything feel special, that's how you end up falling into a place of badness. Where you're just not, where you feel like you're not doing anything new with that person. And so,
I think there's certainly some of that, but
just little things like dressing up can make a big difference in terms of like, oh yeah, this experience stands out in my head. Remember that time we got dressed up and like went out and did something.
Sure. And, I'm just kind of trying to touch on that. I feel like I'm kind of like Nynaeve. Like I didn't grow up with fancy stuff. I didn't have those things. And I, kind of came into adulthood thinking like, this is unnecessary extravagance. And, I don't need those things. Like I don't need all that stuff to survive. some part of me wants to think that I'm better than that somehow. But then when you do get dressed up, you're like, actually, I like this. And I think that's what the girls are going through, specifically Nynaeve.
Right. I mean, Elayne is clearly accustomed to dressing up.
She's had nice things, but not maybe so unpuritanical things.
Fair enough. Yeah, Andor tends to have a certain mode of dress that does not involve being half naked or having clingy clothes.
Oh, sure. And also, this is a place that's so far to the south that people wouldn't wear, thick wool things like Nynaeve and Elayne are used to.
Right. It's just too hot. They're like, snow? What's that?
Yeah, these people don't even know what snow is. They're not going to wear a wool cloak ever.
Right.
I imagine Tarabon is like Sicily or something. Like,
yeah,
not quite tropical,
I could see, like, if it got down to
warm.
like 75, someone might put on a wool cloak because they were freaking cold, because that's the coldest they've ever experienced.
Right.
But like,
other
than that, it's like you're not actually in any danger, and most of us would find that a warm, balmy day.
For us, that's like slightly below raging oven. 75 is hot to me.
Well, do we want to jump into the minds of Nynaeve and Elayne here, or is that just too dangerous for us?
Ugh. Scary, but let's do it.
Just the arguments about them going back and forth with the dresses, and they make good disguises, and we blend in. And it's like, not really. Maybe if you had like,
they're doing it badly.
Yeah, if you had someone carrying you, you would blend in, but you don't. So you should probably have plainer dresses.
And they're like, we sort of fit in. And Elaine's like, we probably should have gotten one of those chairs if we really wanted to fit in. And Nynaeve's like, in that headspace that I was kind of trying to describe. I feel like I did a bad job, but she's like, I would feel like a fool in one of those idiot chairs, like with servants carrying me around, literally. Like, I can't do that.
At some point, I think they do that.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Eventually.
And they definitely should have protection on them because, as we see shortly, they get ambushed.
And Elaine's already been robbed 3 times.
Yeah. And they can protect themselves, but, then they start channeling, and that ends up bringing out Moghedien, so not exactly the best of ideas.
I want to correct myself really quickly. I think earlier I said Tarabon instead of Tanchico a couple of times.
An easy mistake to make. They, especially since I think they're dressed up as Taraboners in Tanchico.
Ugh.
Right? So they're supposed to be out-of-towners, just not
that far out-of-towners.
Yeah. So they're that can get very confusing because I think they're referring to both countries in this chapter. So I feel like the next thing I have is them talking about the meeting with Egwene, where we get a little bit of a recap and their opinion on Perrin going off to be a blacksmith quiet somewhere. They don't realize he's back home.
He's probably just hooking up with that nice girlfriend of his and settling down and starting a business, right?
And no,
Kinda.
Probably not. Probably not.
The business of running a small nation. Yes, that's correct.
So in the middle of that conversation, they get ambushed by Gleb and his 7 men.
7? Yeah, that sounds right.
Because I think it's 8 total.
I didn't realize it was quite that many, but yeah, and I think in that moment it's also important to point out that Eagnin is following Gelb and his men, and she sees them zero in on Nynaeve and Elayne, and Eagnin has the thought, like, one of those women looks kind of like one of the women I'm looking for, except she's a foot shorter. And she's upset, but she also anticipated that these ruffians, for lack of a better term, would mess it up again. So she's storming through the crowd, pushing her way through to stop them from attacking these innocent women.
I think they also didn't expect the resistance from Nynaeve and Elayne with the barrel staves. Like, say what you will about them, like, Nynaeve will hit you in the face with a barrel stave. Like, and it won't be pleasant.
A bulky, balding man in a worn brown coat shoved through the crowd and tried to throw his thick arms around her. She whipped the barrel stave from her shoulder and gave him a crack across his broad face that sent him staggering back, clutching a nose that had surely been broken for at least the second time. Elayne was still gathering breath for a startled scream when a second man, just as big and with a thick mustache, pushed her aside to reach for Nynaeve. She forgot about being afraid. Her jaw tightened furiously because she just got passed up as the kidnapping victim.
Totally.
Her jaw tightened furiously.
She really gets indignant when they don't find her the most important person in the room.
And just as his hands touched the other woman, she brought her own stave down on the top of his head with every bit of strength she could muster. The fellow's legs folded, and he toppled on his face in the most satisfactory fashion. The crowd scattered back, no one wanting to be caught up in someone else's trouble. Certainly no one offered to help, and they needed it, Elayne realized. The man Nynaeve had hit was still on his feet, mouth twisted in a snarl, looking away the blood that ran down his nose, flexing thick hands as if he wanted to squeeze a throat. Worse, he was not alone. 7 more men were fanning out with him to cut off any escape, all but one as large as he, with scarred faces and hands that looked as if they had hammered on stone for years. A scrawny, narrow-cheeked fellow.
Gelb is a scrawny little dude.
A scrawny, narrow-cheeked fellow, grinning like a nervous fox, kept panting. "Don't let her get away. She's gold, I tell you. Gold."
Gold, Jerry, gold! I can't help but think of that quote every single time.
They knew who she was. This was no try for a purse. They meant to dispose of Nynaeve and abduct the daughter heir of Andor. She felt Nynaeve embracing Saidar. If this had not made her angry enough to channel, nothing ever would, and opened herself to the true source as well. The one power rushed into her, a sweet flood filling her from toes to hair. A few woven flows of air from either of them could deal with these ruffians. But she did not channel, and neither did Nynaeve. Together they could drub these fellows as their mothers should have. Yet they did not dare, unless there was no other choice. And so we see the kind of the tough place the ladies are in right now. Like, the possibility of Elayne and Nynaeve defeating 7 men with these little clubs that they're carrying around it's not going to happen. It's impossible.
No,
2 against 7. I mean, they could have a pistol and it still wouldn't. Shoot the first guy, the other guy's already just around your throat.
Overwhelm you, yeah. It's actually amazing they haven't been overwhelmed already. The men must really be cowards. Because, like,
I think to some degree
they could do, 4 on each of them and just swarm them under.
And I think easily. You run up, and these guys are supposed to be really big, like big, strong guys. You run up on a 5'4" woman like Nynaeve or Elayne, who's not very much bigger. They're 2 smaller women, and the first thing they do is break somebody's nose. I think everybody is kind of like, oh, okay. And, they get themselves back together, but
I'm gonna say you brought a knife to a Nynaeve fight. You fucked up. Well, I've got a knife. I've got a Nynaeve. Oh, yeah. Shit.
She'll embarrass you so much that you'll hurt yourself. I want to respond really quick to Rauco in Discord. There's a ton of people on the street, and that's a big part of the scene that so this group of guys are assaulting these 2 women, and everybody just kind of like looks the other way and keeps walking. They don't want to jump in and get involved in this crime. Nobody wants to stick their neck out. So there are people passing by.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of keep it to yourself going on. Like, don't get involved. This whole city's kind of in chaos. There's no real rule of law. And if you get involved in something, chances are it's going to go badly for you. And
no matter how righteous an individual you are or how strong, like, you're really going to jump into a fight and beat up 8 guys for, what are you going to do? This is obviously something happened here. This is somebody else's affair.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out here to buy carrots. Like, I'm not jumping into somebody else's fight.
I also wonder how many of them are like, those rich idiots, they shouldn't have been out here without protection. They're wearing nice silks. Of course they're getting robbed.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder how many people are thinking that, just like, oh, well.
That's true, too.
I'm sure there's some victim blaming going on there.
A bunch of people cowering in the corners begging for pennies, looking at these 2 wealthy-looking women probably being robbed on the street. How much sympathy are they going to have?
Yeah.
Give them your purse.
Take the nice dresses. We don't care.
Yeah.
But they don't. They obviously don't realize they're being abducted. It just looks like a robbery.
And then Eagnin steps in and I think immediately breaks somebody's arm.
Yeah, she just starts bashing heads. I mean, Eagnin's a badass warrior. She's probably one of the more accomplished brawlers we see in this whole book series. Her and Bail Domon, like they maybe not great with a sword, maybe not great in battle, but you want to go hand to hand with them? No, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
She is a hell of a warrior, and so
Those folks got a black belt in the street.
yeah, they totally do.
They can deal with this. Go on, the narrow-faced man urged, waving his hands forward. Go on, it's only 2 women. He made no move to rush in himself, though. Go on, I say, we just need the one. She's gold, I tell you. Suddenly there was a loud thunk, and one of the ruffians staggered to his knees, clutching groggily at his split scalp, and a dark-haired, stern-faced woman in a blue riding dress flung herself past him, twisted sharply to backhand another fellow in the mouth with her fist, knocked his legs out from under him with a staff, and kicked him in the head as he fell. That's Eagnin.
That's Eagnin. She takes out 2 basically right away. They've already knocked 1 down with their staves, so they've gone from 8 down to 5 pretty quick.
Eagnin, who, and I hate to put praise on any Shan-chan, but Eagnin, who hired these men who are messing up the job so badly, she's showing up to kick the shit out of them.
Right.
And
especially Gelb.
Yeah. She does kick the shit out of them.
Yeah, he does. And so now we're from what was an 8-on-2 to 5-on-3. The odds have definitely changed, that's for sure.
Yeah. Elayne starts yelling, forward the Lion of Andor or something, or forward the White Lion, and the men start scattering back, but it's actually because behind her, Eagnin is murdering people. At least that's how I saw that scene.
I definitely see them as running from Eagnin and Elayne.
These dudes are like,
yeah,
their eyes go wide and
yeah.
they're backing up, and she thinks it's because she's yelling. I think in actuality, it's because a real warrior just showed up behind them and takes out 2 guys in like a breath. And she's just striding forward with the cool confidence of a hero in an action movie from the mid-90s.
And I honestly think that the tables have turned, and it's like, this was supposed to be an easy grab. Like, we're 8 guys grabbing 2 girls, and 3 of them are down, 4, and then Eagnin's like knocking another guy out with the palm of her hand, like.
Totally. It's like a good action movie.
Yeah.
The girls are doing okay, and then Bruce Willis shows up, except Bruce Willis is like a mid-height female ship captain.
Gelb sees his chance, which, by the way, how fucking dumb does Gelb have to be to stab the woman he's trying to get the gold from, right? Like, so he pulls a knife out and tries to stab Eagnin in the back.
Yeah, without thinking, Elayne channeled. And she basically just punches him in the gut with a fist of air.
Right, just enough to prevent him from doing anything. Probably not a too big of a channeling, but definitely enough that someone who is close could feel it, or perhaps someone who has wards set out.
Yeah.
That was my thinking, is that Moghedien has inverted wards all over the city, because otherwise how would she immediately pick up on even that small bit of channeling? She would have otherwise had to have been very close.
Yeah, how does she find them?
Well, she mentions that she senses the channeling. She picks up them channeling, and that they were
okay. I missed that.
So, and they were hiding the channeling. She realizes since they're hunting the Black Oddjaw, they weren't channeling sort of obviously. She's like, oh, that's why I didn't pick it up before today. But it still seems like a hell of a coincidence that the one time they channel, Moghedien is that close to them. Seems more likely that she has a bunch of inverted wards set up around the city to help detect female channeling. That would be my guess.
I think you're probably right. And yeah, I should just say at that point, the fight ends and the girls see Eagnin. They're like, thank you so much. The only person to come out of the crowd to actually help us while we're being attacked. If there's anything we can do for you, or they say, hey, our inn's right down the street. Let's get you a drink at least, or something,
And that's definitely sort of one of the first deceptions in the relationship, where it's like, she wasn't just randomly helping them because they were attacked. She was just trying to stop the attack because she set it up in the first place.
Right.
And it was not who she wanted them to attack. But there's sort of that. Is there ever sort of a reckoning for that initial relationship lie, or do they just, they sort of brush over it?
I don't think so. I think they think Eagnin is just a friendly woman on the street.
I mean, they do find out she's Sean Chan.
Yeah.
And they get all upset about that. And, like, she does tell them that, like, oh, well, I didn't initially try and meet you, but once I realized who you were, I had to, like, follow up.
Elayne does recognize the accent, although she doesn't. It's probably not a good way to say it. She hears Eagnin's accent and it sounds familiar.
Right. That was my other big
question. I think she kind of thinks on it for a little while, and after that, it's like, oh.
No, she's not. If they find out she's Sean Chan, someone has to tell them she's Sean Chan. Which I always thought never made sense because, like, dude, they spent all that time in Sean Chan, you know, right, dodging in the city. Well, in Falma, basically dodging the Sean Chan, like a month or two. Like
the second time ever you hear this very unusual accent, you don't remember.
You don't pick that up at all. Like
the last time.
I feel like that's definitely a plot hole. They should have heard Eagnin's accent. It shouldn't have felt familiar. They should have been like, "Oh, Sean Chan," right off the bat. Like unless maybe she's from a different district or something. That's the only thing I can think of is somehow she has a slightly different kind of Sean Chan accent. But
I mean, I didn't see why not. Sean Chan is 2 continents, right? It's like a huge area.
Yeah, it is huge. It is huge.
Maybe not 2 continents, but there's 2 huge land masses. Leia's bringing up a good point. They do think the Sean Chan are defeated and gone.
I know, but it's not like... yeah. I know it's unexpected, but it's not that unexpected.
And when you hear the accent, like...
Right. And they're on the right coast, right? They're on the west coast. They're just slightly south of where the Sean Chan would have been. It's not like it's like...
Yeah, although...
shocking that you would find a Sean Chan who got left behind.
I feel like I want to say... I wonder how well I would do in that situation after hearing an accent... only spoken by the Sean Chan people. So the people of Falma don't have that accent. Only the Sean Chan themselves.
Right.
So maybe I might...
Well, and who's the Shreddit handler that they see they meet in the circus? I don't remember what her name is, but they recognize her accent immediately. And the only explanation I think here is Obscure saying she's in hiding and deliberately trying to hide her Sean Chan accent. I think that's probably the best thing we can come up with. I can come up with.
Like the first part of your sentence clipped out.
Sorry.
Well, it might be me.
Obscure says that she's in hiding. She's trying not to reveal her origin. So maybe she's actually like speaking with a sort of more of a native accent.
Maybe.
Trying to hide her accent. It's the only thing I can think of why the girls wouldn't recognize the Sean Chan voice right away.
Leia's saying that now that they've met Eagnin, they have a baseline. So they sit down and have a conversation with a Sean Chan person rather than exchanging a few words with a few, which is really all they've done before.
Yeah, I mean, they were there for a month. I have a hard time believing they didn't, like, overhear an awful lot of Sean Chan conversations.
They mess it up, regardless.
She had a slurred way of speaking, difficult to understand, but somehow vaguely familiar. Yeah, somehow. So anyway, on the way back to the inn, they realized that she saw them channel. She realized that channeling is the only way that guy could have, like, gotten knocked over.
And Elayne's pretty sly about it. She's like, yeah. You saw that, didn't you? And that's all she says. And Eagnen's like, and Elayne's like, okay, yeah. Here, listen. Thank you so much for your help. We're not going to hurt you. Please try to be calm. We just want to get you like a meal and a drink or something. Thanks for helping us out.
So they sort of walk back. This is where Julian gets his fez. His one concession to Tanchican dress had been to replace his flat straw hat with one of those dark conical felt caps he wore perched on the back of his head, which is, I always feel like that's Julian's signature look, even though he's got the straw hat for a while before that. Like, I really always think of him with that little fez.
Now the 3 women, Nynaeve, Elayne, and Eagnin, are sitting down and having a discussion, and Eagnen's kind of questioning them about, like, tell me more about Aes Sedai, wow, or whatever. Or at least that's how Elayne perceives it.
Right.
Because I think at some point, I'm not going to be able to find it on short notice, but at some point, I can't remember if it's Elayne or Nynaeve, I think it's Elayne, says something to Eagnin like, oh, if you want to come study in the White Tower, we can arrange that. And I don't sense the spark in you, but that doesn't mean you can't learn. So if that's, and they think that she's just a woman on the street who's blown away that they're Aes Sedai, who's like curious and wants to ask them questions.
And we know there's no way she could learn because she's been passed over for Soldom. If she could learn, she would be Soldom.
Right. But we do see Eagnin taken aback even at the offer. And she says, "You can learn? No, thank you so much, but no."
I'm good. Because, yeah, she still is having trouble. She's like, I can't believe I sat down with these animals. And they acted like humans. It'd be like if you and I sat down with like a chimp at a table, and he was like, "Could you please pass me the soup?" And we were like, "What the fuck? I've been told these
and
were
the chimp
animals
was like,
my whole
"Please
life."
take your elbows off the table.
Yeah,
we're like, "Whoa, sorry, I
Sorry,
didn't mean to offend."
Right? Like, what's going on? Like, and then just that like cluelessness that they're actually people too.
And we see a lot of misconceptions that happen in this conversation. Eagnin seems interested, first of all, that the innkeeper was allowed to walk in and babble about fashion. She's like, "I thought you were great rulers. You're Aes Sedai, right?" And they're like, kind of. And
yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at the point after Julian came in and like reported, and they kind of have a little bit of a back and forth, and Julian doesn't seem so happy to serve, but he is doing it. And she was like, "Was that your servant?" And they're like, kind of.
Yeah, kind of, yes, no. And then they changed. One says yes, one says no, and then they swap. Like, well, maybe not. Well, yes, I guess so.
And then Eagnin's like, "So you're nobly born, or you're one of the nobly born, and you're an Aes Sedai?" And she was like, "Oh, is that how you do it? Okay, so you take the nobly born and you educate them, and then you make them believe that you're running their nations while you're actually doing it." And the girls are just like, they just glaze over it because they have no idea what the hell she's talking about. There's just a bunch of misconceptions that happen in this conversation.
Because the Seanchan have a hard time understanding the coalition of powers that are the different kingdoms and the fact that they're not united. They keep wanting to make it all united under the Aes Sedai. They want to make the Aes Sedai the sort of de facto crystal throne and bring everybody and be like, "Oh, well, they're clearly pulling the strings on everything." And meanwhile, the girls are like, "No, we're barely trying to influence people. Like, the idea that we have all the rules under our control is laughable." But that's the mindset that Eagnin is in, because she's from this empire where everyone serves the crystal throne. And then she's trying to make it so that, like, oh, how do you control everybody? And the idea that they don't is just not something that she can even conceive of. I noticed the pretty servant is back, the one who got Elayne drunk, and she's like, gives him a stare of death. Thought that was pretty funny. It's a little joke going on there. Like, "You got me drunk, you bastard."
I like this. I didn't mark it out to read, and I don't really want to read it, but the conversation between Eagnin and Nynaeve and Elayne is really fun. Where Eagnin keeps trying to correct each time she asks a question, and correct herself each time she asks a question. She tries to learn something, and then realizes she knows even less than like the last time.
Right.
It's a fun exchange. Probably reiterating myself a little bit, but Eagnin's like, "Okay, so that's how you rule this area. You rule the rulers." And they're like, "No, like, she's one of the rulers." And Eagnin's like, "Oh, okay, so you're both nobly born." And Nynaeve's like, No, I'm my mother was a farm wife and my father was a tabak farmer." And Eagnin's like, "Okay."
I don't get it.
And they're like, "What did your parents do, Eagnin?" And she's like, "One was a soldier, and my mother, an officer on a ship," is what she says. I don't know what that hesitation is supposed to mean.
Well, she was gonna say in the Seanchan Navy.
Gotcha.
And I think she was like, just an officer on a ship. I probably shouldn't say which ship or which army. It's like talking to the son of a German. And she's like, "What was your dad?" "Well, he fought in World War II in Germany." Like, okay. Maybe not tell him which side he was on, because that's maybe something you don't want to be admitting.
Tom shows up while the women are talking and tries to start telling them about what is happening in politics, and Elayne and Nynaeve kind of disregard him. I feel like it kind of reinforces Eagnin's opinion that these are servants.
Yeah, I mean, this particular section is a reference to the conversation we heard between Bors and Leandrin, Jacob Carden and Leandrin, where they talk about investing Emathera into the Panarch with the White Cloaks by Lord Aldrich or whatever. He wants to be king, and he wants his girl Emathera installed.
Right.
And so there's sort of the politics of, like, it seems really odd that this person's being installed despite the fact that they really didn't win the election or anything. It doesn't make sense. Maybe you should pay attention. Maybe it's a sign pointing right to where the Black Ajah are staying. If you just paid attention, this is the sign. But
it is
they
a
just
sign.
Dismiss it. Yeah.
So Julian and Tom show up right one after the other and give them useful information that isn't easy to find. And the two women, Nynaeve and Elayne, kind of disregard them and shrug them off. And Eagnin's watching all this, like, thinking that these are two of at least a coalition of a number of women who run this entire continent. She's trying to make that fit that narrative.
In a lot of ways, what you're seeing is you're sort of getting a glimpse into the Seanchan culture by the way it views Randland culture, which is sort of more in line with what we see, and that sort of helps us understand going forward the perspective of any of the Seanchan whenever we see them and what their motivations are. It sort of takes them from this dire outside threat invading to this, like, oh yeah, they're people kind of just like us with, like, a weird accent and an odd perspective on things, but they're still people just trying to, like, make their way and, like, survive in this really fucked up world with magic powers and weird beasts.
I think Eagnin goes in expecting to meet animals or monsters or something, and she realizes that they're just women.
Yeah, just like other women. Some are good, some are awful.
Just like all human beings, yeah.
And that's definitely a point that's made repeatedly in the series, that superpowers don't make you a better person.
I mean, the next thing I have really is the innkeeper, for lack of a better term, Rendra, who owns and runs the establishment that they're staying in, showing up and saying that they have a visitor, someone who's asking for them, whose name she forgot somehow.
Because she was compelled to go up there and ask, because that visitor is Moghedien. Do you want... I guess, the only thing I had about the previous section is that they noticed that Eagnin seemed to know Domon when they mentioned him.
She does.
Yeah.
Yeah, the innkeeper shows up, like I said, and the girls are immediately suspicious, to their credit, and start preparing themselves to defend themselves. So Elayne has all these flows at the ready, a shield, bindings,
right,
fists of air, and all that, and both the women are ready, and Moghedien walks in, and they're like, she embraces the power, and Elayne pulls back her power fist, and they're...
under compulsion.
Yeah.
Which tells you just how fast Moghedien must be at that compulsion. But also, they weren't expecting it. They're like, oh, well, she's not one of the Black Ajah.
Right, that's true, too. But she embraces the source, and Elayne is about to react. And then, all of a sudden, they're this woman's best friend.
Yeah, the first time I read this, I didn't realize they were under compulsion. I was like, why the hell are they changing? What? This is such weird behavior. I don't understand what's going on.
It takes Moghedien 2 seconds.
Yeah.
To make the two women forget who they are, what they were doing, why they were doing anything, or that they aren't Moghedien's servants.
They just worship her now.
Yeah.
And there is this sort of parallel, almost mirror relationship between Nynaeve and Moghedien. I mean, they're so closely equal in strength, and, you know, they both deal with this just overwhelming fear, but... you know, as with all things in balance, Nynaeve faces her fear and, you know, walks forward into it, even though she's terrified all the time. Whereas Moghedien feels the fear and shrinks away from it and hides away. I don't know. I think they're two sides of a coin.
Yeah, and it is a little fun as Moghedien is kind of observing the two women and casually talking to them. She says, yes, of course, just a little more than girls, really, barely adults. The two of you are very strong. And she's like, especially you. And she looks at Nynaeve like, you could create problems for the best of them if you were trained.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you weren't blocked.
She sure does create problems for a Forsaken or two.
Yeah,
even
no
though
kidding.
She's untrained.
And she cleanses the source, and she burnt. I think there's some interesting foreshadowing here where it says, "I would love to see Ravine's eyes the day he meets you unblocked," she told Nynaeve. Doesn't she burn Ravine alive right before Rand balefires him? She engulfs him in a big thing of flame, and that's what distracts him enough for Rand to take advantage and kill him. Yeah, so I thought that was just a little bit of fun foreshadowing.
And there's a confrontation between Nynaeve and Moghedien soon, right?
Yeah, the battle in Tanchico over the bracelets, right? That's the whole.
Yeah,
and part of that is
that in this book or in the next one? I can't remember.
I think it's in this one. I think they realize. Oh gosh, I don't know anymore. But Nynaeve realizes that they remember that they were compelled, and then they get all pissed off. And then as soon as she sees her, she remember. Moghedien is all confident that she doesn't remember being compelled, and they do. And so that's actually how Nynaeve is able to sort of seize the initiative and attack Moghedien first and cause that stalemate.
Wait, is that Moghedien that she hits with a rock or something?
With Moghedien, she throws the sad bracelets at her.
Okay.
To distract her. She punches somebody else in the face. There's a lot of standoffs where someone throws something or punches them with something. But the one I always think about is the one in the museum room with Moghedien, and that's coming up. I think it's Into the Palace, chapter 54.
Oh man, I just started flipping through the book and I'm looking at an Aiel war song.
So I feel like we get a lot of information out of Moghedien in this scene because she doesn't expect the girls to remember any of it. The girls do a couple of clever things. One, they are able to hang on to Terangrial because Moghedien asked specifically, "Do you have any Terangrial in your room?" And no, not at all. But they're actually, because they're hanging.
She's
around their
pull
neck.
out your pockets and your purses and empty
Right.
them on the table, and they do. But their important things are actually hanging on a necklace.
Right, they're stored elsewhere. And so they give her a lot of information, and in particular, she sort of says, okay, so... And we just get a lot of confirmation about what has been happening over the last couple of books. Balal is dead. We find out he was killed by Moraine. The other sounds like Ishamael to me. So that is, I think, some really good confirmation, and the first time we really get a Forsaken confirming that the guy who was killed at the end of Book 3 was Ishamael.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to Baal Zaman or the Dark One or whatever. So, all his pride at being half caught, and he was hunted down by a, half-trained boy.
Yeah, it's easy to take those kinds of understandings for granted because we've read this series so many times, but in a lot of cases you don't even know who these people are. It doesn't say that this is Moghedien. We just know it is.
Right. You've read through 4 books, and you're like, oh my god, I had no idea that was Ishamael. Yeah, and you have no idea this is Moghedien here.
Who's this random woman walking in here and taking control of their minds, if you can even understand that their minds are being taken control of. Spoilers.
It's why this book is so good on a reread. I mean, it really does, because it doesn't lay things out for you ahead of time. It expects you to, pick up clues and put things together later, rather than hand-feeding you everything right now, or having the character summarize, after she left, well... that must have been one of the Forsaken because she compelled us for a while and we were able to, it's and based on the number, that must have been Moghedien. So guess what? And you can yeah, I'm so happy that the characters don't figure it out. You just have this random scene in the middle of this chapter and you're like, what? Who? What the? Okay. And you have to remember it and come back to it, books later to understand, or, at the end of the book to understand what it really means.
Yeah, I love the way RJ writes this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then she leaves, Moghedien leaves, and what were we just talking about when she came in? Eagnin had just gone. What was it? I remember what I was about to say. Nynaeve's voice firmed. We must find the Black Sisters without them, or we must find the Black Sisters without them suspecting, We will never have a chance of following them to whatever this thing is that's dangerous to Rand. I know, Elayne said patiently. Hadn't they said that already? Of course not. We have discussed it. And that's the after that, it's just read out. But I just wanted to say I love the way RJ writes that stuff, because that is a really relatable human moment where, like,
wait, did we ever talk about that?
Yeah, you and I are sitting in a room, we're having a quick clipped conversation, and then like someone emails us or something, and we read the email really quick, and then shoot a response, and then we're like, what? Why were we here?
Right.
Like, once you stop the progress, I forget why I was moving at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very relatable anyway.
I love when they realize they've been duped. They're so pissed. Like, what the hell? How did she even come in here to do that? And, like, it really puts their backs up.
Mind control.
It's really messed up.
Why is she there? What's her motivation in this scene?
Well, so all she did is she detected some women channeling and followed them to the source, right? And she was like, oh, there's some channeling, and I haven't picked up before. So she follows them back, and she's like, oh, well, I need to know what these folks are up to. And so she interrogates them and finds out a whole bunch of information about Rand and, you know, all sorts of other things that's going on, and realizes that they're hunting the Black Aja. And she's like, well, you don't know enough. You came pretty close, but you don't know enough about them to be a real threat at this point, and I'm going to just keep an eye on you and keep watching you, and you won't remember this, so who gives a shit?
That's right. And she's like, maybe someday I'll come back for you, because the two of you are valuable resources, but you'll have to be retrained.
No. Which by she means probably corrupted. Because,
Yeah.
you know, the Black Aja really isn't interested in accepted. They only pursue full Aes Sedai. Because it's just like, why else would they? They're not trained.
Yeah.
Moghedien's more just there for information and trying to make herself unseen. She's just been hanging out in Tanchico, manipulating everything, because she is looking. She's commanded Liandrin to find the sad bracelets. That's why she's in Tanchico, because she knows there's something there that can hurt Rand, and so she has them following Amathera into the palace so they can take control of the palace, so they can look for the sad bracelets. So that's all. Amathera being put in the Panarch's palace is totally Moghedien's plan to look for the sad bracelets. So,
and how kind of telling and sort of ridiculous that, like, the same mistake that the big tough guys that tried to jump Elayne and Nynaeve and Allie, it's like the same mistake that the Black Aja and Moghedien are making about them. Oh, they're just two young women.
Right.
What threat could they possibly pose until they, walk in there and start murdering motherfuckers?
Yeah. No, the arrogance of the dark side is large. They tend to always overestimate their abilities and underestimate the good guys. And one would say it's because good guys know how to work together and the bad guys don't. And so they see individuals as weak and dismiss them.
There's a good merch quote in there somewhere. Like, underestimate Nynaeve and
and end up collared.
Yeah, something.
So then we get a little bit from Eagnon's perspective, and then a quick switch to the Seeker at the very end. So I don't know how much of that you wanted to read.
Oh, I was going to start right at the break because it's only like 3/4 of a paperback page. At the arched gates. At the arched gates leading from the inn's small courtyard, Eagnin paused, studying the hard-faced men who lounged, barefoot and often bare-chested, among the idlers on this side of the narrow street. They looked as if they could use the curved boarding swords hanging at their belts or thrust through their sashes, but none of those faces looked familiar. If any of them had been on Bail Domon's ship when she took him and it to Falm, she did not remember. If any had been, it was to be hoped none connected a woman in a riding dress to the woman in armor who had captured their vessel. Suddenly she realized her palms were damp. Aes Sedai, women who could wield the power, and not decently leashed. She sat at the same table with them, talked with them. They were not at all what she had expected. She could not dig that thought out of her head. They could channel, therefore they were dangerous to proper order. Therefore, they must be safely leashed, and yet, not at all what she had been taught. It could be learned? Learned? As long as she could avoid Baal Daman, he would surely recognize her. She should be able to return. She had to learn more than ever. She had to. Wishing she had a hooded cloak, she took a firm grip on her staff and started up the street, threading her way into the passing throng. None of the sailors looked at her twice, and she watched them, to be sure. She did not see the pale-haired man in filthy Tanchican garb huddled against the front of a white-plastered wine shop on the other side of the street. His eyes, blue above a dingy veil and a thick mustache held in place with glue, followed her before sliding back to the three-plum court. Standing, he crossed the street, ignoring the disgusting way people brushed against him. Eagnin had nearly spotted him when he had forgotten himself enough to break that fool's arm. One of the blood, as such things were reckoned in these lands, reduced to begging, and without enough honor to open his veins. Disgusting. Perhaps he could learn more of what she was up to in this inn, once they realized he had more coin than his clothes suggested.
Yeah, so that final guy is that's the seeker who's following her.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to Watts Spoilers, and if you haven't yet, please check out spoilercon.org. And if you're planning on coming to our Little West Coast Con, please RSVP as soon as possible.
There'll be several podcasters there. We know the White Tower is coming, and
That's
I believe
right.
both of them are going to be there. So if you're a fan of the White Tower podcast, this is starting to become a pretty big deal. There's a lot of people who have already bought tickets. It goes on the website. Please buy your tickets by May 31st. That helps us with the planning. That's sort of the deadline of when you need to get a ticket so that we have some idea of when people are going to show up.
And we're getting real close to the level of a regular con. So there are, if you do all your RSVPing, there is a place to stay, there's food to eat, there are events, all of this is included. And obviously not in the one price. So you can, if you want to get a fancy hotel room downtown and then just join us for the events, that's great. You can do that. But all the information is at spoilercon.org. Check it out.
And I think the coolest thing is if you don't want to spend a lot of money on a hotel, the main event is taking place in a hostel that has both private rooms and more communal rooms. So you can either get a decently cheap private room or a really cheap communal room. So if you want to save money by coming and staying, that's a good way to do it.
If all you can afford is a bunk bed, there are bunk beds.
Totally.
But you got to reserve one, which is great because, frankly, up until recently on all of my travels, I always slept in bunk beds or outside because that's what I could afford.
Yeah, I cannot officially endorse camping outside on public land in Portland.
Don't sleep on the street. I'm not suggesting that.
I'm not suggesting that at all. It's definitely not an option, but it will be pretty nice weather that time of year.
It's not a legal option, but if you don't get caught, no harm, no foul.
So, yeah, go ahead and check out the website. There's also, you can keep up with news on Twitter and Facebook. And, feel free to email Leia if you have any questions.
Why is someone using the eggplant emoji to promote this?
Because we're huge dicks? I don't know.
That person is now saying they did not mean to select the eggplant emoji.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?